This is our last class on Luke. We'll see if I get through all the slides. Who knows? Who knows? But yes. So we took a look at last week of who Jesus was associating with, who he talked to, who he sent the message to. He is going to get into confrontation, obviously, with the religious leaders of the time. His message is going to be unorthodox. It's going to be one to kind of the outcasts of society. He's going to spend a lot of time with people that were tax collectors. He's going to spend a lot of people that were down and out in society, people that were looked down upon. He's going to touch lepers. He's going to heal lepers, people that were not allowed to associate in Jewish society. And so this is really going to become a foundation of Jesus' message and who he is going to send the good news to. And unfortunately, the religious leaders of that time were not interested. They were interested to a certain degree, but really pushed back on Jesus as far as control of the message, control of the temple, and control of what they felt was the rituals of the law, during this time. So just, very quickly, we saw this last week. But, when Jesus started his ministry in the synagogue, when he opened up to Isaiah and read, he talked about how in the Old Testament, the widow was healed, but she was a Gentile. He talked about Naaman, the Syrian, who was a Syrian general, had come down into Israel and raided and taken away possessions from Israel. He was hated. Jesus said there were lepers in Israel at that time, but the one leper that is recorded was an enemy of Israel, someone that was hated. And this is going to be a theme that Jesus is going to pick on and continue when he talks about the Samaritans. And so he's going to make that connection from the Old Testament with the New Testament, with another group of people during this time, during the time of Jesus, that were hated of the Jews and were outcasts and were not to be associated with. And there's going to be a couple interactions that are going to show this, that are going to involve his disciples as well. That his disciples even had this prejudice against non-Jews in the gospel. And he's going to have to dissuade them of that notion that salvation isn't just of the Jews. Yes, they received the oracles of God, as Paul says in Romans. But this good news of the kingdom of God was to be sent to everybody, and Jesus is going to start that. Okay, he's accused of blasphemy in Luke 5. He's asked why, his disciples are asked by the Pharisees, why does your master sit with sinners? Does he know how sinful these people are? Levi was a tax collector, right? And then healing up the Sabbath day as well. They were furious with rage and began to discuss what they might do to Jesus. In other words, how to kill him. And so Jesus, in the minds of the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees as well, the ruling elite, you could say, of Jewish society, he was a direct threat to them. Because his teaching really, as we're going to see, is turning Jewish society really on its head and focusing on those people that were poor, that were afflicted, that needed help the most. So let's get into it. So who will be in the kingdom of God? And this is something that Jesus is going to focus on. It's going to be the poor, the despised, and the outcasts. Those people that are struggling now, they have a chance of eternal life through the gospel. And so let's just take a look, a centurion in Luke, the 7th chapter. And this is mentioned in other gospels as well, but Luke has it here. In the 7th chapter of Luke, we have the centurion. In verse 2, and a certain centurion's servant who was dear unto him was sick and ready to die. And when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servant. So there's a couple things right here. number one, we're talking about a centurion. And so a centurion was really the backbone of the Roman army. They were given a lot of, kind of like the sergeants. They were, centurion means 100, and so he had command over about 100 soldiers. And so each one of these 100 soldiers were put into the divisions and then into the legions itself, which was between 5,000 and 6,000 soldiers. So he's here. So the centurion was a visible reminder that the Jews were not free, that Rome was occupying them, and the centurion would be over these soldiers. So, you know, you wonder what the centurion's role was. If you look at the account in Mark, we're not going to turn to it, but he seems to have a good relationship with the Jews at this time. And he had access to the elders of the Jews as well. And so there was, it seems to be now that this centurion had a positive relationship with the Jewish people, particularly the Jewish rulers. So keep that in mind. And when they came to Jesus, they besought him instantly, saying that he was worthy of whom he should do this, for he loveth our nation and hath built us a synagogue. And so here's a centurion being actively involved in doing something positive for the Jews at this time. He wasn't lording over his position. And this is really a continued struggle, because the British, not to get too deep into history, but the British are going to struggle with this as well. For instance, when they go over to India, the first kind of wave of Brits that are going to go over to India are going to take on a lot of the characteristics of the Indian people. They're going to embrace Indian culture. They're going to eat Indian food. They're even going to dress like in the traditional Indian garb. They're going to start growing mustaches, right? Which was a symbol of authority and manliness in Indian society. And so that's why, you look at some of the pictures of Victorian England. What do they have? They have a lot of these very fancy mustaches. And that came all from interaction with the Indian culture. And so this is going to happen. It's always kind of that deal, with the oppressor, with the country coming in and a new culture. How much do you integrate yourself into the culture? And this centurion took the path of, you know what? I'm going to integrate myself into Jewish culture. I'm going to learn as much as possible about them. I'm going to have a positive relationship with the people that I'm here to really kind of control. And so the Jews recognized that. Did other Romans do that? They didn't. No. Did other soldiers do that? No, they didn't. They used their power to oppress people. But this centurion was different. He had a good relationship with the Jewish people. Verse 6, then Jesus went with them, and when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. That's an incredible statement coming from a Roman, recognizing the power and the authority of Jesus, and saying, I'm not even worthy for you to come into my house. It's from a Roman, right? From a Gentile. And I think this is why this is going to play an important role. This is another story that Luke is going to put into his gospel message. It's another example of a Gentile showing great faith, of recognizing Jesus as the Messiah. Verse 7, wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee, but say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. So he's recognizing the power of Jesus as well. And how many of the scribes and Pharisees would say that to Jesus? How many of the scribes and Pharisees and the religious elite at that time showed the respect to Jesus that just say a word? And here was, again, a Roman, a Gentile saying these things about Jesus. And it's what? It's setting the stage for the gospel message now to be preached to the Gentile world, to the Roman world. And he says, in verse 8, for I am a man set under authority, having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, go, and he goeth, and to another, come, and he cometh, and to my servant, do this, and he doeth it. So the centurion says, I have power as well to do these certain things. But I recognize that my power isn't even close to your power, to the power that you have. I'm not worthy for you to come into my home. And when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him and turned about and said unto the people that followed him, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. Now that's a very provocative statement by Jesus, isn't it, brothers and sisters? To say this about a Roman soldier. A Roman soldier that had power and authority over the Jewish people, that sent soldiers here and sent soldiers there. And here is Jesus saying, in all of Israel, I haven't seen greater faith than this Roman, than this Gentile, someone that you despise, someone that you hate. A lot of Jews hated Romans at that time. Understandable. But Jesus is saying that the gospel message of God is greater than the Jews and the Greeks and to the Romans. It's for everybody. So I think this is a great example of Jesus taking the gospel message and spreading it to everybody and including everybody. And if we go on in that 7th chapter, in the 11th verse, and it came to pass the next day. So the next day, and we talked about this, that Jesus was always always among the people. He always was having these relationships with people. He was trying his best to build relationships and to heal people as best he could. And there was very little downtime for him, right? There were always people around him looking to be healed, to hear his words. And this is often why Jesus, at certain times in his ministry, what did he have to do? We talked about this last week. What did he do? He went to a quiet place. He went to the wilderness. He went up into the mountain to pray and to meditate. And his disciples came with him. It was really just kind of recharging the batteries, having some time alone. And we talked about this, how exhausting it can be, emotionally, being around people, dealing with people's problems, dealing with the issues that people had, the physical pain that they had. And we know that Jesus had an intimate connection with that, because remember the woman that had she crawled and she touched the hem of his garment. He said, "Who touched me?" Because he felt that virtue went out of him. And so there's a physical connection. In any event, next day after this happens, he heals the servant of the centurion. And it came to pass the next day that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and much people. So there's this kind of gaggle, this great crowd of following Jesus. And when he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and much people of the city was with her. So let's just let's stop for a second here and just kind of visualize in our mind what's going on. Jesus shows up into this city. He's got a great people with his disciples, his great amount of people. And he sees a funeral procession. In this funeral procession, there's a widow, and her only son has died. Now, what kind of position would this widow be in? She has lost her husband at some point. She is now losing her son. This is a very difficult situation for this woman to be in. There's no one really to provide for her now, right? Her husband is gone. Her son is now gone as well. And so she's really destitute at this time. And that, this is why when we look at the Old Testament, there's this constant exhortation to the people to remember the fatherless, to remember the widow, right? To remember the stranger as well. Those people that were afflicted the most in an economic situation. And here is this woman who now has lost everything in her life. She has no one to help her. And so she doesn't say anything to Jesus, doesn't say a word to Jesus. Jesus just sees what is happening. He's come into the city. He sees this funeral procession. Verse 13. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said unto her, weep not. And so I believe, brothers and sisters, that this is the only account where Jesus is going to perform a miracle on somebody without being asked directly to do it. That Jesus, just out of compassion for a suffering of another human being, is going to use his power to raise this person from the dead. I think it is a wonderful story. And it's a wonderful miracle that Jesus is going to perform. He genuinely had compassion for this person that he never met. But he understood this woman's circumstances, that she was destitute at this time. And she was filled with sadness and with sorrow, that now she didn't know what was going to happen in her life. How am I going to feed myself? Where am I going to live? Who's going to take care of me? And Jesus recognized that and told her, weep not. And he came and touched the bier, and they that bare him stood still, and he said, young man, I say unto thee, arise. Again, the touch of Jesus, right? Touched the dead body. Made himself unclean again. Made himself unclean with the leper. Made himself unclean by touching this dead body. And as Sister Sandy pointed out last week, he didn't have to. He didn't have to touch the leper. He didn't have to touch this body. He could have just said a word as he did with the centurion's servant. But I think he wanted to show that. He wanted to show the power of human touch and the power that he had. Or he wasn't unclean by touching this body, maybe ritually under the law, but he was raising this individual again. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak, and he delivered him to his mother. What a great ending, right? He stands up, he speaks. Hey, what's going on? What am I doing? What's, you can understand how, maybe disorientating that might be, right? Raised from the dead. Just a little bit. And there came a fear on all, and they glorified God, saying that a great prophet is risen up among us, and that God had visited his people. That's true. God had visited his people, has sent his own Son, the manifestation of God himself. And so when we talk about that, when we talk about the Son of God and Jesus manifesting what God was all about, here is a wonderful manifestation of the character of God, the compassion and the love of God. And he says to this woman, don't weep. And it reminds us of the account in John about Lazarus, doesn't it? When he sees it says numerous times in that account that Jesus was troubled in the spirit when he saw all the people weeping and grieving and crying over the death of Lazarus. And he says, and this is why Jesus wept. He had compassion for these people. He had compassion. He understood the loss. And that's why he says those great words, Lazarus, come forth. And he says, very similar things. He says, he said, young man, I say unto thee, arise. We're not sure. He was a young man. How young he was, I don't know. But imagine the mother here being delivered unto his mother again. And all because Jesus had compassion on this widow. There was no one else that this widow could turn to. No one else. It was just a grieving process. She had the grieving process to look forward to in a life of desolation, of destitution. But Jesus showed compassion on this person. Widow said nothing to Jesus, said nothing to him. And it was out of the tenderness of his own heart that he gave back this woman's son. It's a wonderful story. We talked about some of these, right? The parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, right? Let's look at it quick. 18th chapter of Luke. So keeping in mind this theme of the religious elite and the tax collectors, the poor, the destitute, people, the outcasts of society. And he spake this parable in verse 9 unto them, which trusted in themselves. He's talking about the religious elite at this time. That they were righteous and despised others. We get that sense in Luke, don't we, brothers and sisters, of the religious elite being up here, isolating themselves, passing judgment on everybody, and despising the uncouth masses. They isolated themselves from everybody. It wasn't like Jesus. What did Jesus do with the crowds? He was in there. He got in the mix. They pressed upon him. It's different with the religious elite, wasn't it? Two men went up to the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican, a sinner, tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank you that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. Let's think about the mindset, right? I think the mindset is interesting in the Pharisee. Thank you, God, for not making me like all of these other scrubs out there. Thank you. Yeah. Well, the thing is, Jim, we can get into a mindset like that, I think, right? And now he's reminding God of all the great things that he does. I fast twice in a week. Ooh. I give tithes of all that I possess. He gives 10% of everything that he has. Very good. And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And so there's a lot of words of exhortation and a lot of lessons we can gain from this parable. It's a wonderful parable, but it's really about attitude. The publican recognized that he was a sinner, and he wanted God to be merciful to him. The Pharisee never recognizes that he's a sinner. He's up here. He's got it all figured out. He despises the publican. He never says to God, forgive me for my sins. Be merciful to me, God. I am a sinner. He's reminding God of all the things that he does. I fast twice a week. I give 10% of everything that I have. I'm righteous, God. Thank you for not making me unrighteous. Thank you, God, for not making me like one of these despised people. And so that's a common theme in Jesus' ministry. You're all sinners. You all need the gospel message. You're not above anybody. Don't cut yourself off from your fellow man. Don't cut yourself off from your countrymen. Don't isolate yourself. Spread that gospel message to everybody. We have to look at all of these, but prodigal son, right? Zacchaeus as well. We looked at that yesterday, last Sunday, and then a quote from Luke there. Questions, comments on this before we go on?
Is there anything about name that is unusual? Does it happen anywhere else? Why was he there? Is there anything special about it, or that just happened to be where he was?
I think that just happened, Jim, kind of on his journey and his path. It took him to this city. He had a great crowd with him. He was following, and he came upon this funeral procession. Obviously, it was in Providence, but I think it was just on his journey. And I'm not sure, to be honest with you, where Nain is located or what the history of the town is. It'd be a good little study to kind of, look at. Maybe someone else has some background on Nain. But
It's in the Galilee region.
yeah, and I think he was kind of he started up in the north and made his way down towards Jerusalem. Okay. The poor will be saved before the rich. The parable of the rich fool in Luke 12, okay? Just a couple comments on this if we look at Luke, the 12th chapter. If we look at verse 13, before he actually gives the parable, so verse 13 of the 12th chapter of Luke. he said there's this interaction. It says, one of the company said unto him, Master, speak to my brother that he divide the inheritance with me. So there's a money issue, right? They're fighting over money. Who should have what percentage, right? And he said unto him, Man, who made you a judge or who made me a judge or divider over you? Jesus wasn't, he wasn't come to be a judge over money matters. And so with this as kind of the catalyst in verse 15, and he said unto them, Take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he has. So that's a powerful statement by Jesus. The love of money is the root of all evil. Wanting more and more and more, never being satisfied with the things that we have, having a wrong attitude about possessions. They're just things. Sometimes we like our things, particularly in this society. We like our creature comforts for sure. And I think oftentimes it's very difficult to put ourselves into a situation where you don't have anything. Like a lot of people that follow Jesus had nothing. Scraped by. Majority of the people, just to show how kind of out of touch we are with how the rest of the world lives, 2 billion people in this world live on $1 or less a day. $1 or less a day. 2 billion people. It's incomprehensible to think about that. But that's the majority of the world stuck in poverty. They're stuck in this poverty where they're just barely making it by. And we're removed from that in this country. And that's just, listen, it's not a bad thing, but it can skew the way we view things, doesn't it, in this country? And in other countries as well. But Jesus was talking to these people. He interacted with the people that were making $1 or less a day. These are the people that Jesus was sent to. But there were people that were concerned about money. They were concerned about things. And so he gives the parable of the rich fool. He spake a parable. The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plenty. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do? Because I have no room within to bestow my fruits. And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all of my fruits and goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And so one of the things here is the amount of times that this individual, this rich man, uses I. Me. Right? It's very self-centered, isn't it? He's got it all figured out. He's going to do everything by his own hand. These are all my things. I'm going to do this. And God is never in the mix here with this rich man. He's looking at everything that he has as a product of his own power. And everything is his. It's his land. It's his fruit. And so, obviously there's a lesson about being self-centered, about being concerned about money, but also being puffed up and arrogant, that everything that we have in our life is by our own hand. We can think that way sometimes, because we all, for the most part, work very hard for the things that we have. It's not $1 a day, but a lot of us, given our circumstances, we struggle as well with finances. And we would always like more money, I'm sure. But we can get caught up in it. We can always be thinking about doing things for our own selves and thinking that we control everything in our lives. And God didn't have a place in this rich man's life. And that's the moral of the story at the end of the day. He's going to have to give account. And all the great possessions that he had, and all of the time and the effort that he put in building bigger and greater. So no use to him. Absolutely no use. Yeah, parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and then inviting the poor and the lame and the blind to the banquet, to the kingdom as well. We won't look at it. Yes, Jim.
There's also, and I know it runs right along with what you're saying, there was an attitude that Jesus fights constantly, which was the idea that if you were rich, that God was blessing you. And if you weren't, that means that God was mad at you.
Right.
And Jesus throws that in the face. And if you think about it, that still continues today. What they call it today is they call it the prosperity gospel.
Yes.
And the prosperity gospel flies in the face, although it's called gospel, and they try to pull it out of the Bible, flies in the face of everything that you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point, Jim, because even today, particularly at that time, if you were wealthy, if you were a noble, God was blessing you. God was with you. If you didn't have those things, there was something wrong with you. You were doing something wrong. You were sinning. Absolutely. And today it's the same, the prosperity gospel. I don't know how big it is now, but certainly, in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was big. That, God, if you're truly following the gospel message, God is going to bless you. And if you're wealthy, it's a sign of God's blessing upon you. And that's not the case. It's not the case at all. It may be. I mean, there's plenty of people, that have money, Christadelphians, that are good brothers and sisters. But that in and of itself, money, has no bearing whatsoever on, how righteous or unrighteous you are.
Verse 15 of chapter 12 does not exist in the prosperity gospel. We don't have it in that Bible.
No, right. Right. It is, I really haven't looked at the prosperity gospel, in depth, but it's always fascinating to me how the thought process of people, like how do they get to the prosperity gospel? And how do they, like if you said that you were talking to someone that was a real proponent of the prosperity gospel, and he's like, hey, turn to Luke 12:15 for me. Can we talk about this? How do you fit that into the prosperity gospel?
Avoid it.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yesterday I was listening to one of these gospel things, and it started out with beautiful music, and then he said, "It is prophesied that your debts are all going to be forgiven. You join us, you send in what you can, and all your debts are going to be forgiven."
Wow.
Someone in a desperate situation
Yes.
would want to hold on to that.
Sure.
And they lure them in.
Yeah. They occasionally on TV, I'll be scrolling through and I'll see some old reruns of like Jimmy Swaggart. And he's still, I don't think he ever went away. I think he's just, he's always had a ministry, which is pretty incredible. Jim Baker, right? Same type of thing. And it's amazing the amount of money that these guys make just on, the anxiety of people and the desperation of people that want, their lives to change and things in their lives to go better. The prayer, the prayer lines, $100, we're going to say a prayer for you. And then the millions and millions of dollars that these guys rake in. It's unbelievable.
People want someone to take care of them.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is what happens in Nazi Germany when Hitler was coming up. They wanted a leader they wanted to be taken care of. So it's kind of a
Yes.
demagoguery of these fellows getting on and feeding off.
They're looking for another savior.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Abraham was considered rich, but he was rich and paid.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, Abraham was a great man. It mentions the wealth that he had, but the emphasis is on the great faith that he had. God never says Abraham is my friend and he's a great man because of the wealth. He was a great man because of the faith that he had in God. It's a great point. Absolutely. Yep. In our readings yesterday about, Paul talks about this. He says, I'm not spreading the gospel message to make money off of it, even though I could. You don't muzzle the ox that treads out the corn. But Paul was doing to spread the gospel to all men. And he says, I'll do whatever it takes to spread this gospel message. He says, I'm not going to take a dime from anybody to do it. Right? And that's why, he was a tent maker, and wherever he went, he paid his own way primarily for it. But, things are different, obviously. What time do we have here? Okay, let's talk, I think this is one of a big thing in Luke is women in the gospel. We talked about this in our past classes, that women in Jewish society, and in the ancient world, it wasn't just Jewish society, culturally, women were second-class citizens. They didn't certainly have the same rights. A lot of them couldn't read and write. A lot of them were kind of stuck in, the home. Weren't given access, obviously, to any jobs. It was very male-centered. Weren't part of the political establishment for the most part. So there were struggles. Women were oftentimes overlooked as well in ancient society. Not all the time, but in Jewish society as well. But Luke lists 13 women that are not mentioned in the other Gospels. Why does he do that? Why is Luke, bringing up these women? And without getting into it, but we'll take a look at some quotes about this. Women of great faith. We looked at Elizabeth, right? Manna. Look at that. I can be Mary and Anna. Manna. Mary, Anna, right? The widow we just talked about. The woman who anoints Jesus' feet. All of these people that are interacting with Jesus. Women were a big part of the ministry of Jesus. And Luke talks about this. The women who supported Jesus financially. I think this is an important point. In the 8th chapter of Luke. It talks about a couple women here. Verse 1, and it came to pass afterward that he went through every city and village preaching and showing the glad tidings of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, and certain women which had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of whom went 7 devils, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward, and Susanna, and many others which ministered unto him of their substance. So we have Mary Magdalene, we have Joanna, and we have Susanna. So there are 3 women right here, and many others. There are other women. And what did they do? Ministered unto them of their substance, gave them money, gave Jesus financial support as he traveled around. And so, whether or not these women, I would imagine that Herod's steward it was a position of authority, maybe had a little extra spending money, and Joanna, these women may have had financial means to give. They obviously did, to give to Jesus. So they're supporting Jesus financially in his ministry. The woman healed of the bleeding, right, crawls to Jesus to touch the hem of his garment. Woman of great faith. Mary and Martha. Okay, they're mentioned in John as well, but Luke mentions them. The crippled woman healed on the Sabbath day. We'll have to look that up. The poor widow as well. In Luke 21. Take a look at this. This is about this aspect, right? Is about man and woman, but also about rich and poor. Jesus is bringing that up again, right? And he looked up in verse 1 of Luke 21, and he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury, right? And this was another kind of show. They would go in and they would throw their coins in, and it would clang, 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 right? It was almost like the bells ringing out, "Behold my wealth," right? And so it was just another way, you're in the, they're in the treasury, they're up at the temple, right? The rich men come in, they're showing how wealthy, and as Jim pointed out, maybe how righteous they are as well. I'm rich. God has blessed me. I'm righteous. Clangety clang. Here's all my money going in. And he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. Just small pennies. Pennies. And he said, "Of a truth I say unto you, that this poor widow has cast in more than they all." All of these rich men, this widow has given more than all of these rich men, these powerful people. "For all these have of their abundance cast in unto the offerings of God, but she of her penury hath cast in all the living that she had." Everything that this widow had. And it goes to show, brothers and sisters, how poor widows were in the ancient world. She had pennies. That's all she had. And she gave it to God. So again, Jesus is kind of turning society upside down. Wasn't the rich men that were righteous, people. Wasn't the rich men that God had blessed. Wasn't the rich men that had showed faith in God. It was the poor widow with the pennies. That is who Jesus calls attention to. And so we read these stories and it's normal to us, right? It's part of our existence. It's part of our character. But imagine seeing this or hearing these things for the first time. Jesus says to his disciples and to the people in the temple, this poor widow is greater than these rich men. What? That's crazy talk, Jesus. But that was the truth of the matter. And this is we can kind of get a little insight into why the religious leaders at the time wanted Jesus out of the way. We've had enough of this guy, his teachings, and then all these miracles. We just can't compete with this. We have structure, we have order, we have the temple. We've done these things for thousands of years. Who is this guy? He's blowing it all up. And so in a lot of ways, Jesus was a radical. He was a radical in the way that he thought about bringing justice and the gospel to all mankind. Not just to the ruling elite, not just to the rich. To everybody. And that's the great theme of Luke. The gospel message was to be spread to the Jew first, but also to the Greek and to the whole world. And that's what we are called to do as well. When we go out to our place, when we interact with people at our schools, at our jobs, wherever we are, preach the gospel. In word and in deed, in the way that we act and behave. So, questions, comments from me on anything that we've talked about? All right. Well, I've enjoyed giving the classes. I know I can be a little long-winded and go off on tangents, but thank you for listening. All right. All right.